Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to the Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they are in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
Beyond the 60 apprehended or detained and many deported since September 11th, another group of 140 Israeli individuals have been arrested and detained in this year in what government documents describe as, quote, an organized intelligence gathering operation designed to, quote, penetrate government facilities. Most of those individuals said they had served in the Israeli military, which is compulsory there, but they also had, most of them, intelligence expertise and either worked for Amdocs or other companies in Israel that specialize in wiretapping. Earlier this week, the Israeli embassy here in Washington denied any spying against or in the United States.
On June 5th, 1986, hi, my name is GDF, and you can probably tell by the direction that this video is going in that I'm not very advertiser-friendly. For that reason, I rely completely on my patrons, subscribers, and donations. The Washington Post published an article written by Charles Babcock titled, U.S. an Intelligence Target of the Israelis, officials say. From the article, quote, there is evidence that Israel has run intelligence operations in the United States for years, despite Israeli assertions that the Jonathan J. Pollard spy case was an isolated episode, according to current and former U.S. intelligence officials. Israeli intelligence services were more active than anyone but the KGB, John Davitt, longtime head of the Justice Department's Internal Security Section until his retirement in 1980, said in a recent telephone interview, end quote. A substantial New Yorker piece on Jonathan Pollard from 1999 by none other than Seymour Hersh bore the name Traitor. From the text of that article, quote, in the last decade, Jonathan Pollard, the American Navy employee who spied for Israel in the mid-1980s and is now serving a life sentence, has become a cause célèbre in Israel and among Jewish groups in the United States. The Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, a consortium of 55 groups, has publicly called for Pollard's release, arguing, in essence, that his crimes did not amount to high treason because Israel was then and remains a close ally. Pollard has never denied that he turned over a great deal of classified material to the Israelis, but he maintains that his sole motive was to protect Israeli security. He told United States District Court Judge Aubrey Robinson Jr. in a memorandum submitted before his sentencing in 1986, I never thought for a second that Israel's gain would necessarily result in America's loss. How could it? End quote. Hersh writes that when the Clinton administration tentatively agreed to release Pollard during Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, then CIA Director George Tenet told Clinton that he would resign in protest. Clinton backed off. The intelligence community at large was so outraged by the prospect of Pollard's release that they began leaking sensitive details about the Pollard case, including what secrets he gave away. Going back to the article, quote, Pollard, these officials told me, had done far more damage to American national security than was ever made known to the public. Many officials said they were convinced that information Pollard sold to the Israelis had ultimately wound up in the hands of the Soviet Union. Supporters are mistaken in believing that Jonathan Pollard caused no significant damage to American national security. Pollard gave the Israelis vast amounts of data dealing with specific American intelligence systems and how they worked, a most sensitive area of intelligence defined as sources and methods. It also hindered the United States' ability to recruit foreign agents. A number of officials strongly suspect that the Israelis repackaged much of Pollard's material and provided it to the Soviet Union in exchange for continued Soviet permission for Jews to emigrate to Israel. Other officials go further and say there was reason to believe that secret information was exchanged for Jews working in highly sensitive positions in the Soviet Union. a significant percentage of Pollard's documents, including some that describe the techniques the American Navy used to track Soviet submarines, was of practical importance only to the Soviet Union." End quote. No less an intelligence official than William Casey, the CIA director during the Pollard affair, also reportedly adopted this theory. Back to the article, quote, "William J. Casey, the late CIA director, who was known for his close ties to the Israeli leadership, stunned one of his station chiefs by suddenly complaining about the Israelis breaking the ground rules. He asked if I knew anything about the Pollard case," the station chief recalled, and he said that Casey had added, "For your information, the Israelis used Pollard to obtain our attack plan against the USSR. All of it. The coordinates, the firing locations, the sequences, and for guess who? The Soviets." End quote. Despite a plea deal, the judge gave Jonathan Pollard life. The full scope of his leaks still aren't known today. Pollard was released from prison in 2015 and moved to Israel in 2020. As will become abundantly clear to you all by the end of this video, Israel spies more aggressively against the United States than almost any country, friend or foe, in the entire world. The following is an early CIA history of Israeli espionage from March 1979. Quote, "In 1954, a hidden microphone planted by the Israelis was discovered in the office of the U.S. ambassador in Tel Aviv. In 1956, telephone taps were found connected to 2 telephones in the residence of the U.S. military attaché." End quote. Regarding the methods of spying on officials inside Israel, quote, "Shin Bet personnel are experts at entering private quarters where they go through visitors' luggage and personal papers. Special portable camera equipment is used for this purpose, and the results are processed in the Shin Bet laboratory. Shin Bet technicians have concealed radio transmitters in phonograph cases, in the false bottoms of coffee cans, and in the bottoms of portable cooking stoves, which can be used as stoves without removing the communication equipment." End quote. In the Journal of Palestine Studies Summer 1998 issue, Duncan L. Clark provided an enlightening audit of, as described by the title, Israel's economic espionage in the United States. Quote, "While other countries conduct economic espionage against the United States, Israel is the only major recipient of U.S. foreign aid to do so. It is just one of the dozen countries identified by the National Counterintelligence Center as active against U.S. interests. Israeli espionage against the United States is also distinctive. No other country is more frequently said to have a unique, special relationship with the United States. And no country receives more reliable political protection from Congress. The United States and Israel agreed in 1951 not to spy on one another, but while there is little evidence that the United States has conducted economic espionage against Israel, the agreement has been flouted repeatedly and flagrantly by Israel. Israeli economic espionage has infuriated the U.S. intelligence community." End quote. Clark provides a detailed record of Israel spying, including the Recon Optical case, involving an American firm of that name that produced surveillance equipment. In 1986, security guards caught 3 Israeli Air Force officers stealing 50,000 pages of proprietary information. They had been stealing these materials for a year. Israel was ordered by an arbitration panel to pay Recon Optical $3 million. In the early 80s, the Israelis were found to be stealing classified blueprints of F-16 fighter jets out of the General Dynamics plant at Fort Worth, Texas. After the Reagan administration banned exports of cluster bombs to Israel following their invasion of Lebanon in 1982, U.S. Customs intercepted Israelis plotting to illegally export them to Israel in violation of the order. Later in the decade, Connecticut-based NAPCO Incorporated helped Israelis illegally export secret technology for chrome plating the insides of tank barrels. NAPCO even pled guilty and was fined $750,000. No Israelis were prosecuted. In May 1985, a Richard Smith was charged by a federal grand jury of smuggling 810 Critons to Israel. Uses for Critons include acting as electronic triggers for nuclear weapons. Smith was released on $100,000 bail, but failed to appear for trial. He was later seen in Israel. In 1990, it was reported that an executive of American contractor SAIC illegally transferred missile defense technology to Israel. 1991, Israeli General Rami Dotan was convicted by an Israeli court for conspiring with an executive of General Electric, Herbert Steindler, to illegally divert $40 million of U.S. military assistance. Not the first time this happened, nor the last, as in 1994, a U.S. federal court indicted Steindler again for the same offense. 1993, Israel illegally acquired remotely piloted vehicles technology, allowing the Israeli company Maslot to underbid its American competitors. 1997, according to an FBI affidavit, a civilian employee of the U.S. Army Tank Automotive and Armaments Command, or TACOM, named David Tenenbaum, admitted giving, quote, non-releasable classified information to every Israeli liaison officer assigned to TACOM over the last 10 years. This included classified data on theater missile defense systems, the Bradley fighting vehicle, ceramic armor, and other weapon systems. This takes us up to the date that Clark's article was published, and we will look at more examples, including up to the recent past.
Why would Israelis spy in and on the U.S.? A General Accounting Office investigation referred to Israel as Country A and said, quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Country A conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the U.S. of any U.S. ally.
But first, a February 1996 report from the General Accounting Office for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence titled Economic Espionage, Information on Threat from U.S. Allies. Quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Israel conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the United States of any U.S. ally. Classified military information and sensitive military technologies are high-priority targets for the intelligence agencies of this country. According to a classified 1994 report produced by a U.S. government interagency working group on U.S. critical technology companies, Israel routinely resorts to state-sponsored espionage using covert collection techniques to obtain sensitive U.S. economic information and technology. Agents of Israel collect a variety of classified and proprietary information through observation, elicitation, and theft. End quote. The report features examples of Israeli espionage against the U.S., many of them the same that were reported by Duncan Clark. Bob Drogan and Greg Miller, writing for the Los Angeles Times, provided new information on the topic in 2004 in an article titled, Israel Has Long Spied on U.S., Say Officials. Quote, despite its fervent denials, Israel secretly maintains a large and active intelligence gathering operation in the United States that has long attempted to recruit U.S. officials as spies and to procure classified documents, U.S. government officials said. Said a former intelligence official who was familiar with the latest FBI probe and who recently left government, there is a huge, aggressive, ongoing set of Israeli activities directed against the United States. Anybody who has worked in counterintelligence in a professional capacity will tell you the Israelis are among the most aggressive and active countries targeting the United States. The FBI has investigated several incidents of suspected intelligence breaches involving Israel since the Pollard case, including a 1997 case in which the National Security Agency bugged 2 Israeli intelligence officials in Washington discussing efforts to obtain a sensitive U.S. diplomatic document. End quote. The article describes the dangers facing U.S. officials stationed in Israel. Quote, U.S. diplomats, military officers, and other officials are routinely warned before going to Israel that local agents are known to slip into homes and hotel rooms of visiting delegations to go through briefcases and to copy computer files. End quote. Another case, a more contemporary example, names a familiar face to those who watch the channel. Quote, the latest counterintelligence investigation began more than 2 years ago and initially focused on whether officials from a powerful Washington lobbying group, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, passed classified information to Israel. End quote. In 2012, the Associated Press plunged headfirst into the uncomfortable conversation with an attention-grabbing headline. Former U.S. officials say CIA considers Israel to be Mideast's biggest spy threat. The article describes some of the risks associated with being a spy or a diplomat in the Jewish state. Quote, "The CIA station chief opened the locked box containing the sensitive equipment he used from his home in Tel Aviv to communicate with CIA headquarters, only to find that someone had tampered with it. He sent word to his superiors about the break-in. The incident might have been dismissed as just another cloak and dagger incident in the world of international espionage, except that the same thing had happened to the previous station chief." In a separate episode, according to another two former U.S. officials speaking to the Associated Press, a CIA officer in Israel came home to find the food in the refrigerator had been rearranged. In all the cases, the U.S. government believes Israel's security services were responsible. End quote. In light of these shocking reports, quote, "U.S. national security officials consider Israel to be, at times, a frustrating ally and a genuine counterintelligence threat. The CIA considers Israel its #1 counterintelligence threat in the agency's Near East Division, the group that oversees spying across the Middle East, according to current and former officials. Counterintelligence is the art of protecting national secrets from spies. This means the CIA believes that U.S. national secrets are safer from other Middle Eastern governments than from Israel." End quote. Contrary to the claim that Israel's interests are America's interests, as evidenced by the subsequent quote from Joseph Whipple, a former senior CIA clandestine officer and head of the agency's Office of Congressional Affairs, who told AP, quote, "They have their interests, we have our interests. For the U.S., it's a balancing act." During the Bush administration, the CIA ranked some of the world's intelligence agencies in order of their willingness to help in the U.S.-led fight against terrorism. Israel fell below Libya, which recently had agreed to abandon its nuclear weapons program. End quote. A significant development came in the form of a Newsweek article in May of 2014 by their national security correspondent Jeff Stein. Quote, "Israel's espionage activities in America are unrivaled and unseemly," counter-spies have told members of the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees, going far beyond activities by other close allies such as Germany, France, the UK, and Japan. "No other country close to the United States continues to cross the line on espionage like the Israelis do," said a former congressional staffer. A former top CIA operative told Newsweek, "It was the last place you wanted to go on vacation." I.C. Smith, a former top FBI counterintelligence specialist during the Pollard affair, tells Newsweek, "In the early 1980s, dealing with the Israelis was, for those assigned that area, extremely frustrating. The Israelis were supremely confident that they had the clout, especially on the Hill, to basically get away with just about anything. This was the time of the criteria country list, later changed to the national security threat list. And I found it incredible that Taiwan and Vietnam, for instance, were on it when neither country had conducted activities that remotely approached the Pollard case, and neither had a history of or a comparable capability to conduct such activities." End quote. This piece elicited outrage from the Israelis, and Newsweek published a follow-up just days later, again written by Jeff Stein, who reported, quote, "Israeli Intelligence Affairs Minister Yuval Steinitz, among other top Israeli officials, unequivocally denied the Newsweek report, saying Israel stopped all spying operations in the U.S. after Jonathan Pollard was convicted of spying for Israel in 1987. One anonymous official was quoted in the Israeli media as saying Newsweek's account had the whiff of anti-Semitism in it." End quote. Far from backpedaling, the author provides another bombshell, emphasizing the audacity Israeli officials operate with, writing about, quote, "a surprise visitor to Vice President Al Gore's room in a hotel suite in Jerusalem. A spy in an air duct." According to a senior former U.S. intelligence operative, a Secret Service agent who was enjoying a moment of solitude in Gore's bathroom heard a metallic scraping sound. So the room was all quiet, he was just meditating on his toes, and he hears a noise in the vent, and he sees the vent clips being moved from the inside. And then he sees a guy starting to exit the vent into the room, the operative recalled for Newsweek. Did the agent scramble for his gun? No, the former operative said with a chuckle. He kind of coughed and the guy went back into the vents. To some, the incident stands as an apt metaphor for the behind-closed-doors relations between Israel and America. Frenemies even in the best of times. The brazen air duct caper crossed the line of acceptable behavior between friendly intelligence services, but because it was done by Israel, it was quickly hushed up by U.S. officials." End quote. Examples continue, and as recently as 2015, Adam Entis reports, for the Wall Street Journal, mind you, Israel spied on Iran nuclear talks with U.S. Quote, "The spying operation was part of a broader campaign by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to penetrate the negotiations and then help build a case against the emerging terms of the deal," current and former U.S. officials said. Said a senior U.S. official briefed on the matter, "It is one thing for the U.S. and Israel to spy on each other. It is another thing for Israel to steal U.S. secrets and play them back to U.S. legislators to undermine U.S. diplomacy." U.S. officials said Israel has long topped the list of countries that aggressively spy on the U.S., along with China, Russia, and France. The U.S. expends more counterintelligence resources fending off Israeli spy operations than any other close ally, U.S. officials said. End quote. The article earned a rebuke from the Israeli government, which spurred a rebuttal from Glenn Greenwald and Andrew Fishman for The Intercept, titled, "Netanyahu's Spying Denials Contradicted by Secret NSA Documents." Quote, "Israel's claim is not only incredible on its face, it is also squarely contradicted by top-secret NSA documents, which state that Israel targets the U.S. government for invasive electronic surveillance and does so more aggressively and threateningly than almost any other country in the world. Indeed, so concerted and aggressive are Israeli efforts against the U.S. that some key U.S. government documents, including the top-secret 2013 intelligence budget, list Israel among the U.S.'s most threatening cyber adversaries and as a hostile foreign intelligence service." One top-secret 2008 document features an interview with the NSA's Global Capabilities Manager for Countering Foreign Intelligence. While noting that Russia and China do the most effective spying on the U.S., he says that Israel also targets us. He explains that a national intelligence estimate ranked Israel as the third most aggressive intelligence service against the U.S. While praising the surveillance relationship with Israel as highly valuable, he added, "One of NSA's biggest threats is actually from friendly intelligence services like Israel." Netanyahu's denials are entirely false. The Israelis engage in active and aggressive espionage against the U.S., even as the U.S. feeds the Israelis billions of dollars every year in U.S. taxpayer funds. End quote. Finally, a brazen example of overt Israeli spying during the Trump administration, if it can be believed. Indeed, in 2019, Politico reported Israel accused of planting mysterious spy devices near the White House. The shocking nature of the operation is described in detail. Quote, "The U.S. government concluded within the last 2 years that Israel was most likely behind the placement of cell phone surveillance devices that were found near the White House and other sensitive locations around Washington, D.C., according to 3 former senior U.S. officials with knowledge on the matter. But unlike most other occasions when flagrant incidents of foreign spying have been discovered on American soil, the Trump administration did not rebuke the Israeli government, and there were no consequences for Israel's behavior. The miniature surveillance devices, colloquially known as stingrays, mimic regular cell towers to fool cell phones into giving them their locations and identity information. Formerly called IMSI catchers, they can also capture the contents of calls and data use. The devices were likely intended to spy on President Donald Trump, one of the former officials said, as well as his top aides and closest associates. Based on a detailed forensic analysis, the FBI and other agencies working on the case felt confident that Israeli agents had planted the devices, according to the former officials, several of whom served in top intelligence and national security posts. "It was pretty clear that the Israelis were responsible," said a former senior intelligence official. So even though Trump has formed a warm relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and made numerous policy moves favorable to the Israeli government, such as moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, ripping up the Iran nuclear deal, and heavily targeting Iran with sanctions, Israel became a prime suspect in planting the devices. Daniel Benjamin, a former coordinator of counterterrorism at the State Department, is now director of the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding at Dartmouth. He recalled once meeting with a head of Mossad, the premier Israeli intelligence agency. The first thing the official told Benjamin was that Israel didn't spy on the U.S. "I just told him our conversation was over if he had such a low estimate of my intelligence," Benjamin said.